Welcome to Talk South Asian to me. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you and leave what doesn't. All right. You ready? I can't believe we're on letter W already. Isn't that crazy?
I can't believe how many times we've said that.
I know. But I just feel like every time we do an episode and we get closer to the end of the alphabet, I'm like,
I know.
we're about
It's
to
wild.
be done with the whole alphabet.
A whole alphabet, A to Z.
Yes.
This is crazy.
This is the last 5, right? W, X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z.
We're down to our last
5.
few.
That's awesome. I'm excited.
Yes.
We've done such good work so far. I'm proud of us.
I would say so. I think we've been doing an amazing job. High five.
Yes, high five. Are you ready for the topic reveal?
I am ready. Drum roll, please.
All right, drum roll. It is work-life balance.
Mm-hmm. 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 Looking at Michelle.
Mm-hmm. I know, right? I was telling you earlier too, when I told my fiance that I was doing this topic, he just laughed out loud because I'm not very guilty of not having work-life balance, which I'll get into a little bit. But it's true. So I'll just be sharing some more struggles and things that I have done to work on, but that'll be a little bit later, some foreshadowing.
I can't wait. Although I feel like I know a little bit of what you're going to say, having witnessed it firsthand.
For sure. Okay, so wanted to dive into a little bit into just a general topic of work-life balance when it comes to psychology research and just psychologists writing articles about work-life balance. So the first article that I found, it's published or posted in positivepsychology.com. It was published in 2021. The title is Work-Life Balance in Psychology, 12 Examples and Theories. So some key points that I kind of grasped from this article was that work-life balance is driven by 3 factors: changes in work environment, changes in life, and changes in individual attitudes. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of definitions out there, but the most common understanding definition is that there are 2 domains in life, typically, right? Work and personal or work in life. And requiring balance is important, and for the well-being, it's important to not sacrifice one for the other. Mm-hmm. So, quote from this article is that work-life balance is achieved when there's little conflict between a person's work and personal roles. Mm-hmm. And then benefits of work-life balance include, more time to focus on yourself, right? Doing personal errands like doctor visits and things like that. People who, the number of times, I'm guilty of this too, right? The number of times when people are really engrossed in work, they're like, oh yeah, I haven't been to the dentist in years, or I haven't done my physical in years, right? That's, I feel very common. But when you achieve work-life balance, you're able to dedicate time to that. It's also related to high job satisfaction, which is related to less likely to quit or resign, and which is also related to being more motivated at work, right? And then it also has to do with being happy, more time for personal life, and less likely to develop illness and stress-related conditions. So there's some positive health outcomes too with work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a question for you.
Okay. Hit me.
What are your initial thoughts with work-life balance after we talked about this? There's just a lot out there in there's different mindsets out there, and so I wanted to know your thoughts and the concept of work-life balance. What do you think in today's time? What do you think about it? How should we strive for it?
Okay, a couple of different questions in there, but I think the one I want to focus on first is, I think the first thing that really stood out to me and it really resonates with me is you said work-life balance, and I forget exactly how you said it, but the work-life balance isn't just about having more life in the work-life balance. It's a balance. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
And I think that more often than not, we kind of talk about work-life balance from the perspective of we work too much, we need more balance to do our life things, our personal interests, our family time, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of, I think, what the rhetoric is out there right now of work-life balance
Mm-hmm.
means we need more time for personal. And it's like,
Right.
yes, that's true, because we here in America especially, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very like capitalist oriented, right? We do tend to be on
Right.
that hamster wheel of work, 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 work. And like, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how our society really functions right now. But it is important to note that it's a balance of those two.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just about
You're
putting
right.
more into life, it's about finding a flow between the work, between the life, so that you have
Mm-hmm.
both in your life. They're both
Yeah.
important.
Mm-hmm. I think you're kind of spot on what I was going to say next. So I kind of the next thing I found was on psychologytoday.com, and it kind of challenges what I just said earlier, like the
Okay.
idea of work-life balance. Yes. So this
Hmm.
article is actually very recent, posted in 2023 by Gary Trivich. I think I'm saying that right. And
Hmm.
this author said, work-life balance is impractical. Sometimes life takes priority, sometimes work does. And making it the end goal can lead to personal disappointment. So, like, and similar to what you
Hmm.
said, like the flow, right? Like, it's not going to be like the perfect balance. It's going to be like one or the other. But, like, it's important to be mindful of that and then not strive for like work and life balance together, because that could lead to the
Hmm.
personal disappointments, which the author listed, like stress and guilt, potential career limitations, strained personal
Right.
relationships, being judged, and how you achieve satisfaction. So
Hmm.
basically, this article kind of talked about how work-life balance is such like a rhetoric, an idea, like a buzzword out there, right? Like self-care that we've talked about, that sometimes
Yeah.
it can just pressure the person to like really, really forego and sacrifice their own needs to focus on the work-life balance. So the
Mm.
author shared some new terminology, which is work-life integration, which means
Mm.
harmonize and blend work and personal life responsibilities in a way that supports
Mm.
your overall well-being and satisfaction.
Mm.
So the goal of work-life balance isn't just to like work and life balance. It's the goal
Yeah.
should be your own well-being and satisfaction, whatever that means. So that's why this new this new terminology I really like is like work-life integration, is that it might not be a balance. If it means to, if whatever goal, your goal should be overall well-being and satisfaction. So it might not be a perfect balance all the time,
Hmm.
to make sure you have an overall well-being, a good well-being and satisfaction, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. You know, I have to, I feel like I need to sit with this term a little bit more to feel it out. But my initial reaction was kind of like, ugh, because when I think of the
Mm-hmm.
way it's phrased, work life integration, to me, it kind of seems like, okay, so they have to
Yeah.
integrate and mix. And it's like, I don't want them to
No, no,
integrate and mix.
no.
I want work and life
Yeah.
to be separate.
Right.
But I understand the idea behind, what he's saying. And to me, the way I see work life balance, and I tell clients this all the time when we talk about sustainability and we talk about goals and not meeting their goals, they're like, well, I fell off the wagon, or like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but you're looking at it from a very, like, if you're, I know this is on a video and we're also kind of doing an audio podcast here, but I'm making hand gestures. Essentially, think about it like on a smaller scale. If you look at it like on a
Mm-hmm.
day to day or a week to week basis and you don't meet a goal, it can feel like, oh, I didn't achieve this thing.
Right.
But it's a matter of perspective. Now, lengthen
Right.
that timeline. Think about a month. Think about 3 months. Think about 6 months. Think about a year. Think about
Mm-hmm.
5 years, 10 years. How often do you do it? Right? So when we're
Yeah.
talking about balance, it doesn't necessarily need to be like every single day I have 50% work, 50% life in my work life
Right.
balance.
Right.
It doesn't need to be
That's what
even
it
week to
means.
week. Yeah, it
Right.
doesn't even need to
Right.
be month to month. Maybe some months you have IT world. My parents do a lot of these like lives where they have to be on
Mm-hmm.
call and like all that. I don't know what all of
Mm-hmm.
it means, to be honest, but essentially like they have to put in more time in work.
Yeah.
But then with that, they have some like down periods afterwards and before that where they can kind of take some space and do a little less. So if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it from a larger perspective of a longer timeline, that's a balance still. But if you're
Yes, it
focusing just
is.
on that 1 month, you're going to be like, wow, they don't have work life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
a matter of perspective.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And I think it has to do with, I think it goes back to like like yourself, right? Like what satisfies you, what fulfills your well-being, and make sure, like, that I think like that's what this term really means, is like you said, it doesn't have to be 50-50. It might be 60-40
Yeah.
sometimes, or like, and the author kind of broke down a little bit more what this terminology means, like how can you achieve work-life integration. So like the first thing this author, Gary, shared, that was, it's important to know what's important, prioritizing, right? What are your long-term goals, things that bring joy and fulfillment. So that's kind of what you just said, right? Perspective taking. Instead of looking at the narrow short-term goals, let's look at or prioritize our long-term goals too, and see where we are with that. So knowing what's important, set schedules for work, and attending personal matters. So a lot of people, I do this too a lot, is like you kind of mark your calendar for like everything, work and personal related, so I can like make sure I have dedicated time and I'm not double booking and things like that. Being open to flexibility in what you do is important when you're trying to achieve that work-life balance or integration. Delegating and outsourcing everything you can. So like if there's something that you can delegate to in your workplace to someone else, or like, if you're working on a personal matter, you ask someone for their help, like instead of putting everything on yourself.
Yeah.
Prioritizing self-care, being present and mindful. So like I think these all things like speak really highly of like, okay, yes, work-life balance is important, but is the work-life balance I'm trying to achieve, is that related to my self-care also and satisfaction? And if not, like what can I do, and what are some of these things I can do? So like the biggest thing that kind of stuck out to me in that list that I just shared was like, the biggest thing is like time management. And I know we like talked about that in a previous episode, right? Like in order to make sure you have work-life balance or work-life integration, you have to have good time management. I feel like that's like a preliminary step. You have to make sure you manage time well, so you can balance your time and your energy well. So that's something like an overall theme that I was kind of getting when I was reading about work-life balance.
Yeah, that really resonates with me too. And like when I was thinking about like my story today, like that definitely was what was coming up for me when I thought about work-life balance, and my journey with it is time management. 100%. It's an important part of it.
It is an important part of it. And it makes sense too, like logically. Right?
To balance your time between work and life, you need time management skills.
And then I just wanted to share, is just like, this is just from my personal experience too, like just something I've heard like for a long time, like quote, I think like a saying, I'm sure you've heard this too, right? Like do people like work to live, or do you live to work? Like which one is it, right? Like which one is the more priority? Like, are you working to live a good life and happy life, or are you living to just go to work? Which one is it? And sometimes I think like our society and like our values as like a society can sometimes value one or the other. I feel like in the US it's very individualistic, the culture, it's very competitive. So it's kind of like, you're living to work, like you're doing work. You're trying to achieve your outcomes. You're trying to be the best at what you want to be. But when visiting other countries that I visited in my lifetime, like I've noticed like that's not always the case in other societies, right? Like other people are like living to work, or not living to work, working to live. I'm confusing myself. Like they have their own personal life that they look forward to after work, or they have activities that they do. Like work is not it is a priority, but it's not like the end all be all.
Yeah. But they value more of that outside of work time.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of the general research and that I have. And now I'm going to go into like some South Asian specific research on this.
I'm actually really curious.
Yes, I'm excited to share this. So I found this article by a psychologist. The psychologist's name is Rashi Bilash. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I'm so sorry. And this is actually a very recent article. It was posted in October 5th of this year. October 5th, 2023. And the article is titled From Burnout to Balance, a South Asian Perspective to Work-Life Balance.
Ooh, love it already.
Yes, I do recommend this read. It's really good. It's really short, but it's so insightful. So I'm going to kind of dig into and share some quotes and just some paraphrase a little bit.
So maybe we can add this to our story when we release this episode.
Yeah, I definitely think this is worth sharing.
Yeah.
So first of all, the author shares an analogy that I really like. So the author goes that work-life balance is like a blend of spices in a curry, right? Like you have to make sure it's just right for the curry, which I really like.
Yeah, I love that.
Then the author goes into like the history of work-life balance and what our ancestors, how they kind of, what was their mindset on work-life balance. So, back in the years when there was more agricultural settings, agrarian settings, right? There would be sunrise to sunset schedules, and work was life and life was work, right? Like that's all it was. Like you would wake up, do work, eat, and go to sleep. Like that's kind of the focus. And I feel like the author shared that this mindset has been passed down for generations and generations and generations. And that many South Asians today still practice that mindset, right? The culture values dedication, perseverance, ambition, determination, right? All the different values that can drive focusing on work only.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna share this quote that was really like a little bit paraphrasing, but I was like, I have to share this quote because it's so good.
Okay.
So you ready? This is a quote from the article. Our elders may have emphasized the importance of work, but they also valued family and community, which is true, right? They emphasized work, but they also valued family and community. It's time we strike that balance too. Work is essential, but so is our well-being. So I thought that was like really powerful, right? Like, it's important that we recognize that family and community is already a shared value in the South Asian culture.
And I see that too. I think, like we were talking about, right? Like, do you work to live or do you live to work? And I feel like South Asians generally tend to, being very, very important keyword here, generally value both, I think. I think that,
right.
Now, I don't mean like we work always within our passions, but we work and we work hard. But we really do work to make money so that we can enjoy our life and like outside of work stuff. But that doesn't stop us from really like dedicating ourselves to our work and like overachieving and hardworking.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note, right? Like work is important, right? It is an important part of life, like to live a comfortable life and things like that, or like the life that you want to live. But the work-life balance concept comes in when it's like, are you sacrificing your own needs? You're sacrificing the time with your loved ones and things like that. Are you overcompensating your time and energy for work versus balancing with life? So that's a good point. And so this author kind of goes and ends the article a little bit about some actionable steps. And I really like that. So the first step this author shared was that it's important to have self-awareness when there's like an imbalance with work and life. So having that recognition, right? Think about what truly matters to you. So like once you realize like, okay, like I'm not really doing a good job in work-life balance. You recognize that, and then you think about like, okay, like now this is a case, like what truly matters to me? What's the most important to me? And what, like kind of naming those things. And the second one, this is like the hardest one, the trickiest one, and we've talked about this so many times. Can you guess?
I have no idea. I'm drawing a super blank.
setting boundaries.
Boundaries?
Yes, I know.
Love it.
And this is another quote that I really liked, and the author said, boundaries are like the masala in our curry. They define what's in and what's out.
I love that.
Which is true. I know, I loved it too. I was like, yes, it's like the tadka, it's like the spice, like the masala, like it is spicy. Setting boundaries is spicy in our culture,
Spicy experience. Oh,
so it's the masala. It stirs things up,
I love it. The more we talk about this, the more I think it's a perfect analogy.
Right. Yay. I love this analogy so much. Credit to Rashi. Okay. And then another quote that I wanted to share, this is kind of the end of the article, was that we need to change the narrative. Success isn't just about grinding endlessly. It's about leading a fulfilling life. Our ancestors may not have the luxury of work-life balance as we know it, but they understood the importance of joy, relationships, and moments of respite. This is such a well-written article. Like, I just can't, like, this is so good.
I love that we're at this age where we're gushing about articles, by the way. Just saying. But we need to drop a link so I can read this and like everyone can read this.
Yes, it's really, really good. I really liked it. And it was very insightful. But it sheds light to our community, right? Like the grinding endlessly, which is the thing, right? People are working hard, like being the best at everything, the expectations that parents have of their kids, right? We've talked about that in like parenting styles and like just like the different topics that we talked about in the past, we've mentioned, right? I feel like this ties to that, right? Like, sometimes this narrative of working hard, never like endlessly, is actually normalized in households. So like when you
It's
have
glorified.
that self-awareness, it's glorified. You're right.
Yeah.
It's reinforced.
Exactly. It's not just normalized. It's like praised
positively
for doing that.
Positively reinforced. So like challenging that, or after you become self-aware of it and setting boundaries and challenging that, like that can be a struggle. It could be hard.
That could be spicy but necessary, like masala.
Yes, we need masala in our food. Right?
Exactly. Just like we need boundaries in our life.
Yeah, our life,
spicy but
our
necessary.
life's curry, our life's salad needs some masala. We gotta have some spice.
This is a t-shirt idea. I feel like we need a t-shirt that says boundaries, spicy but necessary.
Oh, I like that. Ooh, right? Another t-shirt idea.
We have so many at this point. We can just like open up a store.
We should probably write them down.
We should. I'm gonna forget this one. I'm gonna write it down on a sticky note.
Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of like my overall. I tried to like look on TikTok and social media because I feel like there's could be a lot, but the most videos I saw was like, like people go to the gym and working hard. Like those are the videos
kind of
I
working
saw.
hard.
Yeah. Like they have work-life balance. They're going to the gym, they're spending time with their family, and they're studying, or they go to school or working. So I didn't really find thoroughly like enough. I didn't look maybe like hard enough either. I'm sure there's like TED Talks out there and things like that, other media. But this kind of like was the gist of what I found. Do you have any thoughts or anything?
I love it. And, I love this topic too, just because, I mean, me, for 2-3 consecutive years, I don't do goals for New Year's. I do like intentions lately, right?
Yes, I remember.
And I don't know if I've told you, but like my intention for the past 3 years has been to seek balance in my life.
Yeah.
My company, my counseling and wellness business is called Antra, which in Sanskrit means balance. I'm all about this.
Yeah.
So like I really love this topic because I feel like we do tend to be a little bit off balance sometimes, what's glorified, what's praised in a lot of ways in our lives. And so I really like this topic of work-life balance, but I think we just need to be able to understand it for what it means. Like, like I think Gary had said, it's about the perspective, right? If you're looking at it too narrow, it can feel like a lot of pressure. It can feel like unattainable.
Right.
But it's just about reframing that perspective then. It's about lengthening the way that we see balance, the way we see sustainability, and recognizing that it doesn't necessarily look like 50-50.
Yeah.
It changes.
Exactly. It does. It changes.
So I love this topic. And, I feel like I learned a little bit something new because I didn't know what work-life integration is. Initial thoughts, don't love the integration piece, but you know what? I'm going to sit with it. And I will look at Gary's article, see what Gary has to say.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're excited about this topic. Are we ready to dive into our personal experiences?
I'm ready for you to tell the audience what your experience is.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier in the episode, that I definitely relate to the working until you drop mindset.
Oh, does she?
Yes. And this has been, and it was me pretty much my whole life, my whole childhood, and then pretty like struggling with it now too. But I am working on getting better. Like my therapist and I talked about how this is going to be a huge topic right after the wedding. So that will be really great. I'm looking forward to it. But going back to what we talked about, like being glorified, reinforced, normalized in family. And like, this is prime example. My family is that too. Like even till this day, like the mindset is very familiar. Like my mom is a nurse. She's still working. She's such a great nurse. I'm so proud of her. She's been doing it for such a long time. And I've accepted that she loves her job, but she tends to spend more time there. Like she just loves it so much. My dad shares a similar mindset, like working hard all the time, no matter what. Like it's just like sometimes like if we're like talking about like making family plans or going to a gathering, like work becomes is always a part of the conversation. Like, oh, I don't know if I have work.
Right.
If I do, I can't come. Right. It's like that kind of mindset. Yeah.
The the priorities kind of show
Yeah.
up there of
Yeah. Yeah. And like working hard too, like overachieving at work, like going to the length of not having that balance, like coming home later, like staying late to work. And so I feel like I really resonated with the author who wrote the South Asian Perspective article, that this mindset has been passed down for generations. Like when I was a teacher, like that was really hard for me to find work-life balance. I was staying after school, like school would be over at like 3 p.m., 3:30, and I would be at school till like 7 p.m. Or like my weekends would be filled with grading papers or like planning. Like I didn't have any work-life balance. And so I am definitely like on the journey to self-awareness and setting boundaries. Like the teaching example is a great one. Like after my commitment of 2 years, I decided that like, oh, like I had some self-awareness. Like this is not okay. Like I need to have balance in my life. Like I don't want to work outside of work.
Yeah.
So I realized like, okay, like this is not the pathway I want to continue on. What can I like? I was also passionate about other things, like, so when I was looking into other things, like child life was like a big thing that I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And it also allows me to set boundaries and have balance. So I guess this was a little tidbit of like self-awareness and like setting boundaries for myself, saying like, nope, I'm done with this. This ends here. And we're going to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, there was too much masala in your dish. You needed to cut back.
Right. And then learning, like when we talked about time management, that's something I do struggle with. I'm still learning that time management, like we talked about, is really important to ensure that I have time for balance. And that's a big one for me. Like I'm working on time management. Like I tell myself, like I'm on the self-awareness part of the journey, like generally like long-term wise, right? Like I tell myself, I recognize I'm self-aware. I need to prioritize self-care. But do I take action all the time and make time for it all the time? I don't know. Not always, right? Like I'll be like, oh yeah, like I'm going to work out or I'm going to sleep at 10 p.m. And the next thing I know, like it's midnight. You know what I mean? Like
I do. Knowing and doing are two different things.
Yes. And then I tend to be the overachiever, the person who wants to like work really hard and achieve all the things that I want to achieve. Right. I think this also has to do, overachievement is related to being a person who wants to be well liked. Can you tell where this is going?
Right? People pleasing.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. This is definitely tied to the people pleaser mindset. But I feel like what I'm struggling with the most, right, is a step after self-awareness, right? Setting those boundaries, that masala, that tarka, right? Like I need to add, I'm still working on that. And I feel like I've become aware of the fact, right, that I need balance in life. But how do I change other people's expectations? How do I set boundaries? Like it's not easy. And I know we mentioned this so many times already, right? Setting boundaries is really not easy, especially when you are a recovering people pleaser or when you are raised in a household where boundaries is not normalized, it's not accepted, it's rejected. And so it takes a lot of energy when you're working on setting boundaries. So I have a little tiny example of like, this is kind of work-life balance, but not really. It's more about like setting boundaries for like life goals, I guess. So currently I'm working toward making more healthier food choices, right? So like when you go, like not eating out as much or making my own food, when it wasn't the case before. Like I would go out with my fiance or get food, or even on the weekdays. So like me and Aliman would go out and eat. Like in the past, we would share something good, like together. And so recently, like when I started making this shift, it was like the expectations were the same almost, right? Like we would go out and he would be like, yeah, do you want to split this? And I would kind of like set that boundary, like, no, actually, like I want this. And at first I was so nervous about it because I was like, oh, I'm saying no to share something with him that I used to do all the time. I was worried about him getting upset at me, but actually like he was so supportive. And he started saying like, oh my gosh, let me take a bite of your food. And then he'd be like, oh, I can't wait to start eating healthy with you after we're married, which is so cool. Like he was like, oh yeah, I want to join you in this lifestyle. Like I wasn't even thinking that it would go to that point. Like I was automatically like, oh, he's going to be mad or he's not going to be happy. He's going to be sad. And so that's kind of a small example of like adding masala or tadka a little bit, right? Like setting that boundary. But like for me, eating healthier like is related to my work-life balance in a way because, you know, it affects how I function in work, or it affects how I show up in other aspects of my life. So that's kind of like a little tiny example. But like I said, this is something that I struggle with a lot. I'm a big yes person at work.
Right.
Yes. Like there have been times where, not as often as I used to when I was a teacher, but like sometimes I do have to like maybe like once in a blue moon, like once a year, like I'll go in on a weekend, like extra time to like catch up on things, you know? And for me, that's still a lot too. Like I tell myself like, no, you have to leave work at work. Even at work, like I say yes to everything, but then I want to like, I'm a people pleaser, so I'm like chatting with my coworkers or like talking to them, which takes extra time. So like going back to time management, right? Like it's just a circle. It's a cycle. Like you don't time manage well, even though you're self-aware that you need to balance. So you don't time manage well, then it's like, oh, no work-life balance. And then there's no work-life balance and you're disappointed, and then it's just a circle. So I'm just still circling, you know?
You're in the journey still. You'll find
I'm
it.
still
You'll
in the
find
journey.
it.
Yeah. Yes. And there's some good, like you said, perspective taking, right? Perspective taking, like relatively, like there has been some growth, but definitely one of the bigger struggles that I'm still working on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important to keep acknowledging is like, you're still moving the needle. Maybe it's just not where you want it to be. Maybe it's not going as fast as you want, but you're moving the needle. You are growing. And,
exactly. So that's my story.
Either way.
Thanks.
I know you try.
I do.
But I know it's hard for you.
Yes. Sometimes it's hard for me to add the masala. Even though it's so important. The boundaries are so important.
Yeah, they really are. But, you know, to address what you said earlier, you know, that I don't want to like go into it too much and like therapize you, but like when you said, you know, like how do I like change people's expectations, and when you set this like standard, I think it's just like accepting that we don't.
Yeah.
We can't
having conversations, like stating, like being firm on what you want, right? Saying it out loud.
Exactly. Just voice, like even being able to like radical honesty, right? Just be like, hey, I'm kind of worried that, you know, this is what you expect of me, but I'm trying something new. Radical honesty, you calling out what you're afraid of, but also what you want to try. And even if you don't practice radical honesty, it's okay that maybe people's expectations are let down, because expectations are just maybe what they're used to, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be okay with the new dynamic, right? Like, for example, you know, Oliaman, like he was okay with the changes that you made. More than okay. He was like, yeah, let's do it. I'll join too, you know, and like, he might be in maybe some facet, maybe like let down from his expectation, but not let down in a way that's kind of like, bummer, this really, really sucks. Maybe it's like, oh, this sucks, but this kind of cool too. This is like a new change. You know? And even if it goes poorly and somebody is truly disappointed and is really not like excited for you, that's okay too. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable and it's icky, but like ultimately, if this is something that's good for you, then hopefully they love and care enough that they'll come around to it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. Of course, I already knew this story. I know what you're like, but I am still proud of you, because I have seen, especially like I know, especially this year, how much you're juggling and like how many hats you have to wear. And it is a lot. And I agree with your therapist. I think next year, after the wedding is done, you're going to be like, oh my God, I have all this free time. I'm going crazy.
Right. Yeah,
but that'll be a really great opportunity. I'm going
to try to get things on my plate after the wedding.
Girl,
so she's warning me. She's like, do not add more things to your plate, please. I was like, I won't.
Pinky promise it on
Pinky
live
promise.
right now.
Pinky promise. Actually, no pinky promise. I don't know. Okay.
Oh, she took it back. I know it. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't.
This is a hard struggle. It's hard.
I know. And that's okay. But I think this is a good opportunity, though, because you are at probably, I want to say, maybe your peak amount of capacity that maybe you've ever been on, ever, possibly.
Right.
So it'll be a good opportunity for you to like see the drop off and then be like, oh my God, this is bringing up a lot. And then like dealing with that.
Right.
I'm excited for you. You're probably a little bit scared, but I'm excited for you.
Thanks. I'm excited too.
And I'm here. I'll hold you.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say, I don't want to assume. Was your story done?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't want to assume, but I have to say, my story is pretty much similar, and I feel like we say that a lot, but it is.
Yeah, right.
Growing up, I saw my parents kind of embody the same sort of glorified, hardworking nature. It's quite literally a running joke in the family how much my mom works after hours. Like, she goes above and beyond. She's not working her typical 40 hours. She is working a lot of hours. And it is a running joke that she's constantly working, and she's a workaholic, most of it coming from dad, which is funny because dad is just as much of a workaholic in another way. Like, he stays up late. He was, a couple years, when I was in master's, he was master's or undergrad. Wow, my time sense is all warped. But anyways, when I was still in school, he went back to get his master's. And by the way, side story, he got a 4.0, just killing it in the department. Awesome. And I was like, can you stop showing me up? Kind of mean. But anyways, he was doing that. He was planning a big move to a different country altogether. He was working his typical full-time job, and he was a director, I think, still at that time. So that it's a lot of responsibility. He was juggling all of those things.
Right.
So he basically got no sleep most of the time.
That's rough. Sleep is important.
It is. But see, the thing is, I make all of that to say, clearly they are workaholics.
Right.
And yet they made time for family. They made time for life events. They made time for essentially, a family. They didn't really have I don't know. My parents don't really have hobbies. Their hobbies are literally to spend time with their family.
Yeah.
As cliche as that sounds, it's true. So, all of that to say, they did work hard and show up a lot, but they still found some kind of balance to their life, to what was important to them, their family time. And so, that this right here was very confusing to me, because I was like, you're working too hard, but you're also making time for life things. So what is this balance? That always kind of threw me. And I think now as an adult, now as a therapist looking into all of this, it kind of makes me think that work-life balance is going to look differently to everybody.
Right.
Just like we said, it's not 50-50. I guess it could be, 70-30, and that can still be a balance to somebody.
Right. But there's also a third factor now. I feel like there's work-life well-being balance. I feel like now that, right? I feel like in our culture, it's so common. You make time for work, you to make time for family, but are you making time for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I kind of see that as a part of life, but I can see how that feels like a third, because sometimes, when you make time for other people, especially as people pleasers, we forget that we need to carve out time for ourselves within that.
Right. Yeah.
So it feels like a third piece of the, the puzzle. But I think that is a part of the life piece. And again, comes back to that balance. Work, family, our physical and mental well-being.
Right.
Throw in hobbies, interests, fun, relationships. Throw everything into the mix.
Right.
But that's the kind of model I saw growing up, though. Everybody really hustling and working hard, doing more than the expectation, the 40 hours or whatnot. And obviously when you're young and you're a student, you don't really have balance. Right. You are kind of hustling at that time, especially for those who study, go to classes, and do a job. It can be a lot. There's not really a balance there. So I feel like early on I kind of emulated what I saw. But when I got out of school and I started working for someone else as an employee, I felt like my first real taste of freedom. I had freedom over my schedule. I had a lot of free time. And I was I had a, like, in my work-life balance, I was more life than work. And I loved it. I was like, this is great for me.
Yeah.
I love this.
That's really good. That
Yeah.
sounds
And that was the
nice.
time that gave birth to my 3-day weekends every single week.
Nice. Nice. I like that.
I know. And I loved it. I loved it so much. Having said that, once I left, that place and I started my own business,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's when like the real test and the real struggle began for me. I
Mm.
was, like I said, right, I was seeing this model of work hard, and then I was seeing how and experiencing how as a student, like I had to put in all that work time, less play
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And then I finally, as an adult, got to experience more play than work. But then as a business owner, I was glomming on to this idea of like, I'm a business owner. That means I can set my own schedule. I can do whatever I want. And I did do that for a really long time. But, being a business owner means that
Mm-hmm.
there's actually added responsibilities. I am not
Right.
just a therapist. I am not just an employee. I am running a company, and that
Mm-hmm. You're an
means a lot
entrepreneur.
more. I know.
Entrepreneur.
Can't believe it still.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So it took me like a really long time to come to terms with that idea
Mm-hmm.
that I needed to give more to work than to the play that I had gotten used to.
Hmm.
So my scale was very much skewed for a big chunk of the initial part of my entrepreneurship. I was very much more trying to create more fun, more life, more balance, and less work. And that
Yeah.
really, really bit me. And
Hmm.
I finally, after a really, really long time, was like accepting that fact. And unfortunately, because of all this like pent up work, I did more work, less
Hmm.
balance. So I
Yeah.
was, working late into the nights up until basically I slept. I didn't have like any free time. I was working maybe some weekends here and there pretty
Mm-hmm.
much consistently. But it was still technically considered balance because I had tipped the scales for so long. It just needed to happen. And now that
Yeah.
the scales are a little bit more even, still working on it, but they're a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more even. Now I
Yeah.
finally have the time to actually intentionally carve out some semblance of balance for me.
Okay.
So what that looks like now is like I very much tied to the time management piece. I learned how to manage my time properly and learn some time management skills. And so I've shifted the way that I think about time. I've shifted the way I think about my schedule. I've shifted the
Mm-hmm.
way that I set boundaries with myself within the schedule and with others. So now I
Yeah.
like intentionally carve out time for, like working out. I intentionally carve out
Oh.
time every single week to do like check-ins with, Adi, my husband.
Yeah.
I intentionally create time to like read. I intentionally
It's
create time,
good.
yeah, to like call friends and family and like talk to them. And so I've changed out that rhetoric of I don't have time, I don't
Right.
want to do this, into
Yeah.
I do have time, I can make time, and I do want this because this
Yeah.
actually aligns with my long-term goals.
Right. I like that. I feel like I've noticed that about you. Like you've grown a lot in your time management skills, and I'm sure that's really helped your
Thank
work-life
you.
balance. Yeah.
You have no idea how much that means to me because literally all
Yeah.
my life, everybody was like, you have no time management skills. You're always late.
Now
You
you
always,
do.
rush. And I'm like, oh, this feels so good. Thank you. I heart you. Thank you for seeing
Oh,
it.
of course. It's great. Definitely aspire to that. I look up to you for that.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Because I'm
But
definitely
it is a
rushing
work in
everywhere.
progress and has taken me quite some time to get there, though.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. So that's my story, of my journey and continuing journey to maintain this
Yeah.
balance.
I love it. I love how it's like the yin and yang of their stories though. Like yours has like a good like ending and I'm like, oh, I'm still a struggle bus.
Well, I feel like I have a quote unquote good ending mainly
Right.
because I am just so motivated. And like,
Yes.
unlike you, I'm ready for the life over the work though. But for you, you're just,
Yes.
you've been
I'm still
in this
stuck on the
habit and
work.
this wire
Yeah.
to achieve for, longer. I've always been like, no, I'm going to be lazy. I know who I am.
Yeah. I think it's really tied with my identity, which I'll go into with my therapist, but I think it has to do a lot with that. Like, that's why I'm holding on to it so tight. Like, it's just so integrated on how I view myself, like my self-confidence, my like self-love. Like, I feel like it's very work related, and that maybe I'm having a hard time letting it go because I think it'll change how I view myself.
Yeah. Like, who are you if you are not XYZ? Yeah.
Food for thought.
Girl, that was insightful.
I know.
Powerful.
I know. I'm like, oh, I need to write this down for my therapist.
Quick, write it down.
But I feel like I've been thinking about this too, like when I was writing my story and like preparing for today, like I think it has to do a lot with your identity too, especially when the people who raise you, it's part of their identity, right? Workaholics, like not sacrificing your well-being for work and life.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
You got to make room for your well-being, and
absolutely
that's important.
do. Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Like, most of our day, and an extension, most of our life, is spent at work.
I know. Yeah, you spend more time with your coworkers than your family sometimes, like 40 hours, right? Like, that's the minimum at least. And people they do way more. So you're right? Like, there's just such a big chunk of our life that work takes up too. So it's interesting.
It's hard not to sometimes let it become a part of your identity. And
right.
I think that it's important that we give ourselves a lot of grace and a lot of love and compassion, and recognize like, if we don't love where we have been in our balance, like, that's okay. I mean, we've gotten here for a reason. We've gotten here because we thought it worked for us. That's okay if it's no longer working for us. We just, now that we have this awareness, we can do something about it. But as you pointed out very accurately, knowing and doing, two different things. They have their own little struggles.
Right. So I'm on my little bus walking or riding through self-awareness, about to hopefully make some turns for boundaries, and making,
I love it.
Hopefully add some more masala to my bland curry right now.
Bland or overspiced?
Well, yeah, overspiced, but like, what does masala do? It adds more spice, right?
I see it as too much spice, because there's too much overworking, and like taking some masala, taking some of that spice away, balances your life.
Yeah,
that's how
I'm viewing masala as boundaries, like what the author did. Like, you have to add spice, you have to add boundaries, or you have to add masala.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So if the masala is the boundaries, there's too much masala, as in not enough balanced boundaries. I don't know. I feel like I'm losing it. I don't know.
Oh, well, I didn't think of it that way. We have two different viewpoints. I like that.
It could be a lot of things. Lots of t-shirt ideas will come from this.
Right. All right. You want to wrap us up?
Yes. Let's wrap up. So, reminder, if our podcast has resonated with you and you'd like to share your story with us about your work-life balance journeys and how you view work-life balance, if you prefer work-life integration instead, let us know. You can reach us at talksouthasiantome@gmail.com, or any of our socials at the handle @talksouthasiantome.
Yay. Thank you for listening.
See you guys next time.
Bye.